Good afternoon, Year 6. Today in history, we're going to be looking or beginning to look at a battle, a very famous battle from within the First World War. This battle took place in the Somme, which is in France. It's called the Battle of the Somme, and it started taking place in 1916. It went on for a long time, and many people died. We're going to look at this over this week and next week's lesson. Today, we're going to think about the opening to the battle, the first day of the battle. To be successful in today's lesson, we'll need to identify some of the details of the Battle of the Somme, including the dates and the locations of the battle. We'll need to analyze information, so we'll need to delve down into some elements of information from various sources. And furthermore, we'll need to critique, so we'll need to decide whether we think something is correct or incorrect, accurate or inaccurate within these different sources. To begin, we're going to look at some information about World War One. Now, on the screen, there are 5 sentences. You've also got these on your pack for today's work. What I'd like you to do is to complete these sentences and use the language at the bottom, which is in red, to fill the gaps. So the first sentence relates to when World War One began. The second one looks at one of the combinations of countries which made it one of the sides in World War One. The third one again looks at one of the sides. The fourth one looks at the beginning, and the fifth one again looks at the beginning of of World War One. So please pause this video while you consider which element should go in each sentence. Okay, guys, checking through now. Hopefully you can see the World War One began in 1914 and it lasted for 4 years. So the World War One, or the Great War, lasted until 1918. Okay, so 4 years. The Triple Entente was France, Britain, and Russia. So those 3 countries combined to be the Triple Entente at the initial stage of the war. The Triple Alliance was Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. And again, other countries came in throughout the war onto either side. Sparks, the idea that the catalyst, that which began the war, was the assassination, so the planned killing of the Archduke of Austria, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Okay, and because of that, people from the Triple Alliance felt the need to defend against the moves which had been done, and then because of that, people on the side of the Triple Entente felt the need to go and defend against that. We'll look at more of that throughout the period of the unit of work that we're on. Okay, guys, then the final element, the city of Sarajevo is the city which we were looking for, which is in modern-day Hungary, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and historically that was a province 106 years ago in Austro-Hungary, and when it was a province, a part of that that empire, it was the location for the assassination which took place, which began the actions which precipitated the World War One. Okay, so that's just a bit of recall. There'll be some language later on, which is quite complicated in some of these resources, some of these sources that you're going to look at from World War One and from the beginning of the Battle of the Somme. Now, one of the words you're going to spot is perceptible. I just want to go through how I pull apart that meaning. Now, I know what it means. I'm able to understand that perceptible means able to be seen or noticed. I'm quite fortunate that I've got that vocabulary in my head. But if I didn't, I could use this resource, so a computer attached to the internet. I could use a phone or a tablet. I could use a dictionary to understand what it means and find the definition. Now, I know that perceptible has elements in it that are similar to words such as perceive. That tells me a linkage, part of the family that it's part of. If I can perceive something, I can see it. And that shows me that something's obvious and it's clear. So it's clear to me if I look at this image that I've drawn here, that the man with the hat on is trying to steal, trying to rob. It's obvious. And that's why a synonym for me is it's obvious, it's clear. So perceptible means something which is clear, which is obvious. So somebody can see it obviously. Opposite of something which is clear is that it's hidden, it's covered, it's unclear. Okay, and I could use it his lips curved in a barely perceptible smile. So somebody's they're smiling a little bit, but not much. Okay, but maybe if somebody was just looking at their mouth, they could spot that they were smiling, but it's barely perceptible. So not super clear, just a little bit clear, but perceptible is the word that's synonymous with obvious and clear there, perceptible. Okay, so I've pulled apart that piece of language. There's many others within those sources at the end that you'll read, and I'd like you to try and use the same process if you're unsure of how to use one. Okay, guys. Now, the Battle of the Somme. I'm going to think about the opening to the Battle of the Somme. It lasted, as I said, for a long time. It's one of the costliest battles. And when we say costliest, we don't mean it cost lots of money, although it would have. The truth is, it cost lives. And when we talk here about casualties, we don't mean people who got a bit hurt. We mean that 1.2 million people died. We can see a picture there that's quite shocking of the dead soldiers. We can see those people. We can also see that the battle, although it was long, it didn't last for years and years. It wasn't as long as the war. The battle itself only lasted from July, so from the 7th month until the 11th month. So just 5 months it was going on. July, August, September, October, and November. So 5 months. Okay. And in those 5 months, more than 200,000 people died each month in that location. Okay. Now, you can see that the British Army was attempting to make gains, was attempting to fight towards where the blue lines were. So the British Army was trying to move forward during that period. And you can see that it made some inroads, it made some progress. If you look at the bottom of the map where it says front lines on the 1st of July, that's the beginning of the map. So that's the beginning of the battle. So where those blue lines are, those darker blue lines are, they indicate where the two competing sides were at the point that the battle began. Now, over the course of those 5 months, the line moved so that where the line is to the right-hand side of the map, where it says front lines on the 19th of November 1916, we can see that there had been some progress. However, for 1.2 million lives, the progress, if you look at the key at the bottom of the map, the progress was only about 4 kilometres. And in some places, the progress was really zero. So there had been some British progress, but there was not a great deal. Now, the idea, the plan was to push through. The British wanted to push through the German lines. It was fought on the northwestern part of the Western Front. If you remember last year, there was an Eastern Front and a Western. Sorry, last week there was an Eastern Front and a Western Front within the war, and it was fought. This is on the Western Front. There's small gains, really small gains, but because it was so arduous, it took so much effort. The effort was the big challenge to Germany. The effort wasn't it wasn't that they lost loads of land, it was that they lost loads of people, loads of energy, loads of weaponry. So that greatly weakened their effort. Okay, so sometimes in battles, it's not about the day; it's about the impact outside of the battle that the cost is felt. So for the group of countries on that side, they really suffered due to the fact that that many lives were lost and that many people were lost. Many reasons lots of people died. Okay, it's not just as simple as if every time there was 5 months of battle, 1.2 million people would die. Guns were improving, if that's the right word. It's a challenging word to use, but we're improving. So the aim of the machine guns was that they killed lots of people quickly, and in that sense, they'd improved. I think most of us would think that was a bad thing rather than a good thing. But for the designers of machine guns, they'd got better, they'd improved. They'd got other weaponry, so other artillery and other mines, so things which exploded when people trod on them. They'd got things like hand grenades. They'd got gas which killed people when they inhaled it, when they breathed it in. Planes were being used in battles for the first time. And also tanks. So some of the terrain, so some of the land would normally have or historically have been inaccessible in a battle, only accessible by people on animals such as horses. Now these tanks could go across it. These motorized tanks could go across it. So because of that, people were able to hurt each other more. We can see here the soldier in the trenches. We looked last week at the trenches and why they were so horrible to live in. And these 5 months, these trenches people would have been. Now, on the first day of the Battle of the Somme, 57,000 British people died, 8,000 German soldiers, and 7,000 French soldiers. Now, if you look at that, I think you'd think, well, clearly the British lost. Clearly the other side, headed by the Germans, won. You'd think the Triple Alliance won. However, there's other perspectives. So some people were there and wrote, so obviously some people were there. Some of the people who were there wrote first-hand accounts. They wrote the accounts of what they saw, what they experienced on the day. Some of these accounts were contained within newspaper reports. And what you're going to have a look at doing today is reading these three accounts. When you've read these three accounts, you're going to complete this graphic organizer. So what you're going to think about in the first sections for document A, so that's the first black one, is who wrote it, when did they write it, what type of source it is. So when you're writing what type of source it is, you might identify that it's a newspaper because it tells you at the bottom. You might identify whether it's a primary or a secondary source. So if it's a primary source, it would be one where the writer, the person who produced the source, was there in person. If it's a secondary source, it would be something by somebody who'd not been there in person. You're going to think about whether they experienced the event that they're describing. From reading the source, you're going to decide who they perceived as winning the event, not winning the event, sorry, winning the first day of the battle, who was ahead on the first day of the battle. At the end, you're going to decide if this source is trustworthy. Now, this is what's called a subjective view, your view. There's not really a right or a wrong answer. However, if you just say no, it's a wrong answer. You've got to support your reason with evidence. What is it about that source which makes you perceive it to be trustworthy? Do you believe the writer? Does the writer's version make sense? Are the details clear? So I'd like you to complete that graphic organizer for each of these three sources, please. Once you've done that, you're going to make your own conclusion. You're going to think about whether or not, who you perceive won the first day of the Battle of the Somme. As I say, we'll continue looking at the Battle of the Somme next week. But looking at those three sources, I think you can clearly state that the picture painted by the different sources varies. I think then you can identify that the first pieces of evidence, the newspaper report, showed the writer perceived, so using that word perceived, that perception, and perceived that the British forces, because it's clear in this writer, perceived that the British forces had emerged triumphant from the first day's fighting. That's obvious. But then I add to that, the end of this, I concluded, so at the end of that first article, the conclusion of the view, the concluding view, the writer stated, and I can use my inverted commas from my direct speech because I'm utilizing those in English as well, they're surrendering freely, which indicates they're losing the battle. I could say that and that'd be okay, but then I could back this up a bit more. If they were winning, they would resist surrendering more vigorously. They wouldn't just give up if they were winning. So I think as I go through, that can tell me what the first one tells me. Then I can talk about the second and the third pieces of writing, and I can identify what they show me. Guys, I'd like you to do that based on the three documents, not just based on the one. I'd like you to explain to me what those documents show and whether you believe that it's clear which side was winning after that first day. Maybe you're also going to use some of that evidence from this PowerPoint, where you're going to look at the numbers of fatalities that had occurred on the first day. I look forward to reading those and seeing how you've got on with that. We will carry on with the Battle of the Somme next week. Please, historians, do well on this. Thank you.